So she has a diploma in human resources management, and also if you look at the employment, she's been right now she's a lead consultant at HR Powerhouse Limited. But before that, she was a general manager HR and administration at Kenya Pipeline Company, and previous to that, she was senior executive director at HR Powerhouse. So I'd like to introduce to you Sharon, who is talking to us virtually, and we hope that she will be able to give us a strong message on high performance culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. The sound is not very clear, but I hope I can be heard. Can I just get a confirmation that you can hear me well?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, excellent. Excellent. So let me share my screen. Okay, I hope you can now see my screen. Thank you so much for that introduction. It is an honor and a pleasure for me to be invited to this conference just to share a few thoughts on how the insurance industry can be transformed through a high performance culture. I'm grateful and I look forward to us having a good interaction within this 30 or so minutes. Before then you get the time to ask me a few questions. So just really by way of understanding culture, it is not something that is new to any of us. I am sure you have interacted with the word organizational culture before. And simply saying it, organizational culture is a way of life of an organization. And when we speak way of life, we are speaking about the values that you find in that organization. We are talking about the beliefs that you have resident in that organization, the mindset, the purpose, the behavior, and the behavior expectations that you find within an institution. And I want to emphasize, even from the word go, that culture is almost tangible, it can be felt more than it can be seen. And a culture for an organization is so strong that it can actually change the course of the whole institution. And I guess that is why for this conference, it's been given a whole hour to discuss, because of the appreciation of the place of culture within an organization. And that, as it has been discussed, and researchers have come up with recommendations on culture, it comes out very, very clearly that culture, though I've said it's almost tangible, it actually resides within the hearts and souls of the people who work within an organization. So when we talk about using culture, having high performance culture, having employees whose mindsets are focused on high performance, it means that there is something that has happened in their hearts and in their souls, because that is where culture resides. And really, I think it's important to say from the beginning as well that culture really does matter. Culture does matter. And the reason why culture matters is because every organization has it. Even when we talk about the smallest organization, say even at family level, for example, you find that families have their own cultures. They have the way of life. They have a prescribed manner in which every member of the family is expected to behave. And the same happens for organizations, that every organization has a culture. The question would be, is it a high performing culture? The question would be, is it a culture that enhances performance? Is it a culture that creates an environment within which people within that organization are able to do their best? Is it a culture that creates an environment within which people working in that institution are encouraged and are able to be creative and to come up with newer ways of doing things. Innovation, culture really does matter. Every organization has it, and it literally determines everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything with a capital E. Why? Because a way of life determines behavior, and behavior determines decisions that are made in that organization. Culture determines how those decisions are received within the organization. Culture being a way of life. So it really just determines everything that is done, from the recruitment to the selection, to performance management, to training, to communication. You will find that culture determines all that and even more. Corporate culture matters. How management, for example, chooses to treat its people impacts everything, for better or for worse. Many times when I give talks to university students and asking them, where would you want to work? Which organization would you really want to work? And you can guess that the organizations that they would select are those organizations where the culture is one that develops people. The culture is one that gives the employees the opportunity to do their best and to be their best. And culture is, it's not an initiative. It's not something that you say we want to, be this culture. Culture is an enabler of all initiatives. So you will not have it as one of the many, but culture has to be the basis through which everything springs from. It has to be the basis through which everything within an organization is influenced. And that is why organizations and organizational leaders must ensure and work towards creating a culture that cultivates an environment for high performance. And I'm sure you've heard this said before, that organizational culture, it's strategy for breakfast. That was said many, many years ago by Peter Drucker, but it has continued to evolve and to appreciate the place of culture in organizations. And now what do we say? That organizational culture, it's strategy for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. So once breakfast has gone, and lunch has gone, and dinner has gone, really there's nothing left. So this goes to show us the importance of organizational culture. That even if we have the best strategies on earth, strategic plans on earth, and I'm sure institutions within this industry have strategic plans. So even if we have wonderful strategic plans, even if we have highly competent employees, even if we have the best technology in organizations, the best know-how, if you have, the best, whatever it is that you can have in an organization, but the culture which is supposed to influence all this is negative, then you will not get any positive results. And therefore it is critical that every organization ensures that a culture has been created, has been brewed, has been developed, and continues to evolve that supports high performance. And maybe let me just explain at that point what I mean by high performing organizations. And I will do this by just sharing with you a few characteristics that we find of a high performing organization. One is a high performing organization has a mission. And that mission clarifies to the employees of that organization the work they do every day and how that work contributes to the why that organization is in place. So really what I'm trying to say here is that in a high performing organization, you will find that there is a mission that is known to all of us, to everybody within that organization. And that mission is not just something written and put on the wall, but it is one that is well understood by everybody within the organization. And it helps employees to understand and to see the contribution of what they do on a day-to-day basis. Every institution has a why. Why does it exist? What is the mandate of that organization? Without that organization, what would not be done or what would be missing? And it is so critical for employees to just understand the connection between what they do on a day-to-day basis and the reason for the being of that organization. And just thinking back even to my own experiences that I have traveled in my HR career, in the organizations that we have done a bit of change management, that was appreciated when employees understood how they as individuals contributed to the why. People in an organization are persuaded to perform highly. They are persuaded to take an extra step. They are persuaded to push themselves to the limit. They are persuaded to use their capacities that they have if they have a clear understanding of why they are doing that. If they have a clear understanding of how that connects to the growth, to the mandate, to the outputs which are expected from that organization. The second thing that I have found with high-performing organizations is employees are switched on. You know, employees have energy. They think and feel and work like leaders, like they own this organization. You know, there are people who, they don't drag their feet as they walk. You know, they are confident. They enjoy what they do on a day-to-day basis. They have clarity of expected behavior, and they have the right mindset. I hope I'm describing your organization even as we speak on high-performing organizations, where you find people are switched on, they understand, they are raring to go. They are excited about each working day, knowing that what they do really does matter. And then number three is, in a high-performing organization, you will find that there are systems and processes that have been put in place to support it being a high-performing organization. That there are systems that would support you to adapt to the, you know, ever-changing environments within the workspaces. And there are systems that are consistent, you know, ensuring that what is done within that organization are consistently being followed, being implemented, being reviewed, being looked at, that you don't have a strategic plan, for example, that gains dust on a cupboard somewhere, but that there is consistent follow-up. How are people doing? How are people performing? Where do you require help? How can we help you? So three clear things, that in a high-performing organization, there is consistency of how things are done. Employees are switched on. They are excited. They enjoy what they do. And of course, even as I say that, I'm not saying that it's a very easy environment to work in. It's challenging. But you know what? Employees in a high-performing organization take challenges positively. They learn from them. And the first thing I said is there is a mission. And that mission is so clear to every employee. Now, thinking about what I've just described and culture as we have always known it. In the past 1 year and about 9 or so months, we have had a challenge. And the challenge has been because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that it just threw organizations into some confusion. It threw away a lot of the things we knew about culture, that we build culture when we are together, when we grow together, when we are working together. But COVID-19 came in and showed us a different way, because then all of a sudden, many people had to work from home, which means that a lot of the physical contact was lost. A lot of the team buildings that we usually do was lost. A lot of the meet and greet, which by the way contributes to the growth of culture, as you share a few things over a cup of chai, was lost. It means that people were thrown into environments where they were working alone, on their own, at home, in their space. But think about even the bigger challenge for the new hires. Usually when we take somebody new coming into the organization and we are inducting them, part of the induction is actually to help them understand the culture of the organization, how we do things around here. And so bang, when Corona came in, new hires for those organizations that took on new people were kind of, thrown into some confusion of some sort. And so organizations had to be a little bit creative in ensuring that the sense of culture and belonging and togetherness was still maintained even within those challenges that COVID-19 brought in. So we began seeing a lot of online interactions. There were some happy hours that were thrown out. There were online town hall meetings, meetings to try and put people together and continuously learn, as you would find in a high performing organization. And so as then we share this afternoon on some of the ways in which culture can be used to transform organizations within this industry, there's a critical question that I want to answer today. So I'm narrowing it down to this question, actually my presentation. And the question is, for the institutions within this industry, who are your culture carriers? A culture carrier is an individual within an organization who embodies the desired culture for that organization. It is one who becomes a role model. It is one who other employees would look up to in terms of the culture. And it is said that culture is the shadow of the leader. And therefore, what am I saying? Many times we say that change begins at the top. Change is driven from the top. A lot of things are done from the top. The CEO, the top leadership, the heads of departments set the tone for the organization. And part of the things that they would set a tone on, actually, and be the lead, is in terms of culture. That the top leadership of an organization must ensure that they have identified the kind of culture that would facilitate the organization thriving and being able to deliver on their mandate. So my question of who your culture carriers are already has an answer, that it is the leadership in those organizations. And therefore, if we are to make a change, if we are to influence culture in our organizations, if we are to ensure that we have created an enabling culture, it has to be driven from the top. And let me say it again, some basic facts about culture. That culture matters, and I've explained the reason why. It is what enables teams of people to defy the odds and achieve the remarkable. We're talking about a high-performing culture. Culture matters. People must see the connection between what they do and how they do it. Very, very important. And I've talked about it being driven from the leadership level because culture is best exhibited at the execution level by that manager who is engaged on a day-to-day basis. So yes, I'm talking about the chief executive. I'm talking about the C-suite, but I'm also talking about that manager who is with the people on a day-to-day basis, on an hour-to-hour basis. What are they exhibiting? How is their conversation? How do they carry themselves about? How do they manage their meetings? How do they do follow-up on performance, on what was supposed to have been done. Culture is best exhibited by the manager who is engaged with employees and with the staff on a day-to-day basis. And culture must be deliberate and intentional. I will repeat that again, that culture must be deliberate and intentional. If an organization does not work on its culture, it will build itself, because every organization has one. And therefore, every leadership of an organization must ensure that they're deliberate and they're intentional in the kind of culture that they want to build for their organization, and the kind of culture that they think and trust will help them to deliver on their mandate, even as they become a high-performing organization. I found an interesting quote here, that if you don't develop your corporate culture, it will develop itself. Corporate culture does not happen by accident. And if it does, you're taking a risk. And therefore, my advice to all of us listening to this today is, we must be intentional about the culture that we want for our organizations. And therefore, I am encouraging all of us to then build our organizational leaders, because I have said that culture is best exhibited through leadership. And so for us to ensure that we have a leadership that exhibits the kind of culture that we want, we then must build these leaders. First of all, to understand themselves better and how they are viewed by their teams. Because remember, the people who are below a manager, for example, are able to explain a lot of things and the culture that goes on within that organization. So we must then build our organizational leaders to understand themselves better and how they are viewed by their teams, and also to help them to be able to do little things consistently, and that way to drive the desired brand and culture. Culture is driven from the top. Culture is driven by managers. And for them to be able to do that efficiently and consistently, they need to be equipped. And even as we get to equipping these leaders, I want to quickly say that we must involve them. Why? They are not empty vessels. They have a lot of knowledge. They know a lot of things. They know the organization. But we need to involve them to be self-aware and to self-lead. Now, for you to be able to do that, it then means that there has to be a mindset shift. And this mindset shift is one where a leader has then the capacity, to bring out the best in themselves. A mindset that enables a leader to live their purpose, that enables a leader to support their teams to live their purposes, and to build a leader who has the capacity to take people at the heart. I've been in HR for about 24 years now. And one of the saddest observations I have made is, though we call it human resources, there is more of the resources than the human. Let me say that again. That from the experience I have had, we have more of the resources than the human. And yet it is within the human space that we find culture, which we have said is so influential, is so powerful, it drives institutions. So for us to be able to create institutions, to change institutions, to bring in issues of high performance, we must take people at the heart, because that is where culture resides. In the knowledge of knowing where we want to go, visions for the organization. In enabling us to know how we will get there. culture has a lot to do with this. Taking people at the heart, touching people where it matters. That is when we are able to influence culture positively. How then do we do this? And I said that I will concentrate a lot more in my sharing today on leadership. That we require as organizations, as we look towards changing our organizations and influencing them for high performance, that we concentrate on the leader. But how do we do that? First of all, we need to measure the capabilities of this leader. Their capabilities in terms of delivering on the people space, in terms of influencing the culture, in terms of being efficient in building people, in building other people. Of course, building self and then building other people. We also need to be able to measure this leader in terms of, the capacity they have to build an enabling environment. All these are things that you would find within a high-performing culture. And we have many tools. But today I'm excited to share that we actually have a tool that is developed within our country, one of the first in this particular area, that will be able to measure a leader, a head of department, a manager, a supervisor, in terms of the influence they can be able to give to their people in building a positive culture. Once measurement has been done, we don't just leave it there. The next thing is to develop these leaders. Once you have measured and you have come up with some metric of that measurement, it would then guide you to be able to come up with some leadership development interventions. And here I'm talking about self-development. I'm talking about, creating some standards of behavior within an organization. Remember, culture is exhibited through behavior. And then, of course, coaching, which I'll talk about later. And out of the leadership development, what are some of the results that we expect to see? We expect to see results that you would find in a high-performing culture. One is where leaders and their followers have a positive impact on each other, where leaders impact their followers so positively that people are looking forward every single day to work, to come to work, to contribute, to do what they can do, to better things. Where each employee in that organization is positive about what they do, and therefore they have a positive impact on each other, they have positive impacts on their teams, they have positive impacts on the customers that they deal with on a day-to-day basis and other stakeholders for that organization. The other result, which is really exciting for me, is once you develop leaders to understand and to know that it is their duty to develop other leaders within the organization, that means that you will multiply leaders across that organization. And so issues of succession planning are dealt with automatically, because then present leaders are developing and building future leaders and multiplying leaders across the institution. What a high-performing organization that would be. And then when you have done that leader development, and I'll just show you how in a few minutes, you then create an environment where there is a potential outburst. People are just bursting with their potential. People are pushing boundaries. People are doing what they can do best. People are taking an extra step. People are keen on what they are doing. People are not waiting to be appointed to carry out a certain task, but automatically they flow into it and they're excited about it. Where people have a positive outlook about their own organization. Beautiful stories that are told, not negativity within the organization, where you get little or minimal negative energy, because it must be there in every organization. And the other result is passion, where you see people are so passionate about what they do. I'm talking about changing organizations using culture, beginning from the leadership. That's my message today. That if we are to infuse positivity, high performance into our cultures, it has to begin from the top. It has to begin from the leadership. And so the kind of tool that I'm speaking about here is one that will measure and test a leader in different aspects. And let me just run through those very quickly. I know my time is running. And one is to be able to test this leader in terms of their foundation of coaching other people, in terms of their foundation in supporting a high performing culture in an organization. That this leader will be tested in terms of their strategic alignment. How strategic are they? What is their thinking? What is their level of strategic thinking and strategic implementation? How do they look at things? From what perspective? Sometimes in our organizations, we have people who have been, promoted to a leadership position, but they remain at the operation level in their minds. I'm talking about measuring to see, has this leader risen from being an operational person to being a strategic thinker, leading others strategically? Are they? There's a little bit of noise. Can you hear me? Okay. So the level of open-mindedness of this leader, how grounded and self-assured is this leader? For a leader to be able to be effective, for a leader to be able to influence, because that is their work, for them to be able to influence others into positivity, into high performance, into getting passionate about what they do, they must be grounded themselves. They must be self-assured. They must have emotional balance. And that's why emotional intelligence comes in. We don't have the time to talk about it today. But they must be emotionally balanced, being able to manage themselves. And more importantly, to be able to measure the capacity of this leader to believe in other people's greatness. Believe me, unless a leader is able to believe in other people, then they will not be able to create an enabling environment which high performance requires. Number two is, it is critical that a leader's trust account is measured. In other words, what I mean here is, how are they able to create trusting relationships? How much or what is the level of this leader to communicate, and for what they communicate, be trusted? What is the capacity of this leader to connect? A high performance culture is where there is connection. Connection one to another. Connection one to the vision. Connection one to the mission. Connection to the team spirit. So what is the level of this leader, or what is the capability of this leader to ensure there is connection within that culture? What is the capacity of this leader to care and to show compassion? I said that culture resides in the hearts of the people. So if it resides in the hearts of the people, it means that for you to be able to make an influence in as far as culture is concerned, you must touch the heart of the person. How resilient is this leader? How agile are they to be able to support the organizational culture, even when there are difficulties that organization is going through? This was tested a lot with COVID-19, where managers were expected to show the way, even when they didn't know the way. And then number three is the capacity for this leader, for active listening, being actually present, being intentional, working with his team, working with his people, listening intently, being present with them, listening objectively, supporting them in their performance as they're carrying out their performances, working with them, listening with the heart, as I call it. The fourth one is capacity. What is the capacity of this leader to inspire insight and creativity? Very critical in a high-performing organization or a high-performing culture. That there has to be inspiration to think widely, to get into uncharted waters, the blue ocean strategy, as we call it, to have people to be inspired to see what they are not seeing today, capacity to inspire insight and creativity, to create an environment where people can be creative and to inspire a growth mindset, to grow people, to help them expand their thinking. And more importantly, there is to be vulnerable, which means what is the capacity and the level of this leader to be vulnerable, to accept that they are not a know-it-all, but that they can also learn from people that are below them. Very powerful there. And then the other one is the capacity of the leader to facilitate learning and to multiply leaders, inspiring growth. That's what a high performance culture is all about, that you're inspiring growth. Everybody's growing, nobody's staying at one level. People are equipped, people are mentored, people are coached, and there is meaningful and empowering feedback that is given back. All this towards ensuring that there is growth, that leaders actually multiply themselves. That's what it means. And then the last one is when all that is done, you also require to understand these leaders' capability to scale performance through ownership and accountability. And this speaks a lot to performance management system, that how able, how capable is this leader in terms of performance planning? Because if we don't plan well, like sometimes we say that we are planning to fail. So how is performance planning done? How is performance review done? How is the performance support provided across the organization? And how much are people held accountable? So I'm talking about these 6 areas that if we are beginning to think about using culture, and rightfully so, to change our organization within your industry and others, to make them a high-performing organization, then we must focus on the leader and ensure that we have understood and we have capacitated and we have developed our leaders to be able to coach or to have at least a coaching mind, to be able to be open-minded, to be able to appreciate that other people know, to be able to believe in other people's greatness, to be able to build trustworthy relationships and maintain them, to be able to be present with their teams, to have the capacity to inspire others, to influence others, to facilitate their learning, to multiply leaders within the organization, and also to scale performance to ownership and accountability. So if you forget everything I have said since I began, these 6 are very, very critical and important. So when you carry out this evaluation for these leaders, there are 3 results that come out. And I'm speaking about a tool that has been developed within the country. You could use other tools, but I just chose to share this with you. Then it is a tool that is called the Global Coaching Index. And what it does is it gives 3 main results. One is it gives you a leader coaching index. In other words, you then understand the capability of this leader to coach his team to high performance, the capability of this leader to develop his team. Of course, first to develop themselves and then to develop their team. So it gives you an index. And from that index, you can be able then to develop leader development programs towards enhancing their skill. And the number two is using the leadership coaching index for a team. You can be able to then come up with a team coaching index showing you the capability of your teams. Very, very powerful there. That are these teams capable to create, to support a high performance culture? That within those teams, how are the team leaders? How are the team members? And what is the kind of influence that is being put to these teams to develop them? And then the last one, which would be a good one to have, is the organizational coaching index. Now understand the whole organization. How are we in terms of creating ourselves, developing our culture, changing our culture to a high performing culture? So let me end, because I think I'm almost getting into the time for question and answer, by saying that culture change takes time. Even as we think through bringing changes into our cultures, we must appreciate that it takes time. Research has told us it takes from about 7 years and above to be able to change culture. And it's because it's about people's mindsets. Number two, something else I want you to go away with is words don't build culture, it is behavior. Words do not build culture, it is behavior. And therefore, as we strive to change our cultures into high-performing cultures, it's about the behaviors that we infuse into our organization. It's not about what we say we will do. It is actually about what we do. If you're to maintain a high-performing culture, you must build infrastructure that would then support the desired values and the desired behavior. And like I said at the beginning, culture exists in every organization. It can be defined and harnessed, or it can be left to take a life of its own by virtue of the behaviors of those within the organization and the decisions that they make. And I think this is the slide that speaks a lot about myself, that HR must actually change. I said earlier that I have observed in my experience a lot of the resources without the human. And therefore HR must change to be able to see people as people, not as resources. Creating a culture, excuse me, that can help them to build their careers and to live their dreams. That's when culture begins to make sense, even to an employee. Viewing HR not as a support function, but it must be at the forefront of driving the business. Why? Because human resources department is the one that guides in the development, in the maintenance, in the growth of the culture of an organization. If you can influence your people, you can direct your culture and you can deliver on your mandate. Thank you very much. I welcome question and answers. Session chair, maybe I can hand over to you.
I was just walking to the podium. Yeah, thank you, Sharon. That's excellent. It's fantastic. What you have basically brought out is you're reminding some of us of what we should be doing. And on the other hand, you're also you're giving us new insights. And I've got a few comments that I've got from online. But what it is important to say is that what you said about culture is very, very important. And I think what it is leadership matters and the way the leadership behaves and supports the managers to also improve themselves. And I think the most important area is the tool that you've been talking about. The tool it actually gives us maybe a guidance as to how we can help ourselves and our staff to improve themselves and create the new leaders that we require to carry the high performance culture. And as you said, we must connect to people, we must listen, we must influence, and we must show them direction. And it's all about people, passion, and performance. There is somebody who said, who was asked that they would, Peter Gakinia would ask us to say, would you be able to very quickly share ideas on how institutions can mold and sustain corporate culture in the era of remote working? I don't know if you have a few minutes on that, or, a very quick answer or quick guidance.
Sorry, the sound is not very clear.
Okay, let me repeat it again. They are saying that, would you be able to share ideas on how institutions can mold and sustain corporate culture in the era of remote working?
Okay. Okay, I can answer to that. Like I mentioned, when remote working came in, and it was a new phenomenon to many of us, at least to many organizations, it threw us into some disarray. But it is important that as we endeavor to build the culture, first of all, we identify what is this culture that we need. Because it is from understanding what the culture that we need that will guide us into the how. Yeah? So once we have identified and said, this is how we want our people to be able to meet once a month, or we want our people to be able to meet once a week, or whatever we decide, that we want our people to exhibit these kinds of behaviors in our organization, we then sit down and create ways in which that can be done. Yeah, and to be able to put a checklist, to be able to put a performance evaluation tool within what we have said we want, so that we are able to measure and ensure that it is implemented consistently. Consistency really does matter. That we must have the system that ensures we are consistent, even with what we have identified that we want to do. And one of the lessons we have learned from working remotely is that culture can be built remotely. Interestingly, that it is not the being together physically that you're able to build this culture, but there is a way we can get to each other. There is a way we can communicate to one another. There is a way we can infuse the kind of culture that we desire for our organization, even without being physically. I hope I've answered that generally.
No, I think this. Just before I go to some comments that we have here online, I would like, if anybody here has got a question, anybody in the room, any comments? Yes.
Thank you, Sharon, for the excellent and insightful presentation.
Thank you.
The speakers in the last two presentations mainly focused about the innovation and technology. And in the process of the presentations, they also mentioned about employee issues. And I will quote what the first speaker said: obsessively engage with employees. The second speaker said, treat an employee as a board member as an employee. So in my view, it means that organizations have to deliberately and intentionally allocate both financial and non-financial resources to talk to the souls of its employees. So from your perspective, what are the three things that an organization or a leader needs to do in order to achieve the threshold of obsessively engaging with employees and also treating employees as board members? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that what the other two speakers really just resonates with a lot of what I have shared with you this afternoon. excessively engage with the employees. I agree with that. And then treat employees as if they were board members. So for me, the three important things I would say in terms of being able to do that is, one is a leader, a supervisor, anybody who's in charge of people must be vulnerable. Vulnerable in the sense that they can present themselves with these employees and say, I do not know. I am also learning. What can you tell me? What can you share with me? Can we learn together? That's what I mean by vulnerability. Sometimes as leaders, when we position ourselves as all-knowing, we lose out on so much. And sometimes even in leadership, we can look down upon some roles within our organization. But you know, every single person in an organization matters. They are not an empty vessel. They have something in their mind that they can share. They're only required to be given the opportunity. And that opportunity can be given by a leader, a supervisor, a manager who allows themselves to be vulnerable. Number two is you can be able to excessively engage employees if you're present with them, present as they do what they do, working with them the journey as they, deliver on their tasks and their responsibilities, present with them to facilitate their learning, present with them to, self-correct whatever matters they come along, present with them to help them solve the problems, present with them to empower them to do things themselves, not you doing it for them, but for empowering them to do it themselves, and truly listening to your employees. There is such a power in listening to employees. You may not have the solutions, and we hardly do, but the fact that you are there and you listen, you're able to pick so much. And the number three for me would be keep your promises. When you promise, deliver on your promise. That is when employees will trust you. That is when you will build your trust account. And that is when you'll be able to truly engage with the employees at a level of trust. Those are my three answers.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay. So we come to the end, Sharon, we come to the end, but I just have comments from the panel, from the people on the virtual, who are watching us virtually. Now,
Yes.
there is one person who has already said, and is repeating it, is that we must have a frequent use of collaboration tools, and that is very important. But then there are so many commendations. Beatrice says that we should thank you for the insights. Your mastery of this subject is amazing. Keep up the good work of knowledge and impartation. Joseph Marca says, this is excellent. The depth of knowledge, practice, and passion is self-evident. Keep it up, Sharon.
Thank you.
Is excellent. Agnes says, excellent presentation. Eliud Mangi says, please share the slides for this session too, which we will. These are being recorded and they will also be sent to everyone. Then Jacqueline would like us to say thank you. This was an excellent presentation. And Belinda says, wow, captivating and very insightful. Irene says, very insightful session. Practical tools. Thank you, Sharon. And Lucy says, thanks, Sharon, for the great presentation. And for us, I think it's, before I hand over to the MC, it's very important for us to understand what Sharon has said. And this is one of them is obviously keeping the promise and leading by example. So thank you very much. And sorry, we have the director. Agnes would like to say a few words.
Thank you. It's just a question which I felt, let me just ask. I just wanted to ask Sharon, what part does attitude
the attitude of the employees play in terms of the issue of culture? I'm just trying to see where the attitude may come in all this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. Attitude is critical. But remember that there are certain factors that leads to the attitudes that employees would have. And a lot of those attitudes are actually shaped by the culture. Interesting. That the culture would shape some of those attitudes. If you have a high-performing culture, believe me, the employee's attitude would be one of going out and doing things and taking an extra step. That would be their attitude. If you have a culture where your leadership team does not listen, the attitude of your employees will be complaining forever. This hasn't been done, no one listens to me, no one understands me, etc. So culture has a lot to do with building attitudes that you find. And it is then important that a leadership team in an organization puts a lot of energy into building the kind of culture they want. Otherwise, if you leave it to grow on its own, then all these attitudes that people come with will be your culture. Can you imagine how that would look like? So have a control, guide the culture, guide what is there, and the attitudes will be taken care of. Thank you.
Okay. All right, that was great. Obviously, attitude is very important. And just one more comment. Thank Sharon for the excellent presentation. Managing multiple generations in the workplace in today's business environment is not easy. As a HR advisor, that management strategy would address the distinctive characteristics of the different generations. So I think one of the things that Sharon did not mention, but all of us are grappling with how to deal with the millennials. And obviously, I think with the millennials, the attitude is very, very important, because only if you can get the millennials to understand your positive attitude and get them to have a positive attitude, you will be able to succeed with them. So, One MC, the floor is yours.
And just one more comment. Love these millennials, work with them. They can do so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon, for that wonderful, wonderful way to cap it. I don't know whether I can be termed as a millennial just by virtue that niko na kitambi, so ni anti-millennial. Now, thank you so much for being with us through this session. I have a lot to pass across, but of course, I will definitely be able to do that within minimal time to ensure that we have gone for our lunch. But I'm sure the breakfast is still under digestion, so we will consider you ready for lunch anytime soon. So quick things. Number one, before the warmth and the joy of this session ends, I wish to do something that is very African. Most of our presenters have been virtual, and the paper chairs have been also virtual, but luckily we have a paper chair who is here physically with us, Mr. Ashok Shah. Now, for that reason, for being here with us, we have a gift for you. That is the African part. I used to go greet my grandmother when I would leave. She will give me a lot of gifts. Mpaka watu wa matatu walikuwa nasema na waharas. It is the amount of food that I carry. That's why I'm this way. Now, in the same way, I will pass this opportunity to Triza Mburo, the IRA rep in the IIK Council. Triza will be handing the gift to Bwana Ashok Shah. Triza, kindly come. The gift, Ian, please pass that gift, and then we will be able to, you can hand it in the best way possible for you,